The night Claire decided to cook again, the power went out across the neighborhood, and the house fell into a sudden, heavy quiet that felt louder than any noise. Rain hit the windows hard. Wind pushed the trees, and the silence inside reminded her of everything missing. This was the kind of night people remembered later and said that was when something changed, even if they didn't know it yet. Claire stood alone in the kitchen of a modest Oregon home. Sleeves rolled up, heart beating faster than it should. About to do something she hadn't done since before grief settled into her life like a permanent guest. 2 years earlier, the house had been full of laughter. Now it was careful and polite. David, her stepson, lived upstairs like a quiet shadow. He worked late, ate alone, and avoided long talks. Claire understood more than he knew. She wasn't his real mother, and she never tried to replace one. She had only tried to be steady. After his father died, both of them learned how to survive without asking for help. That was the problem. Survival left no room for warmth. Claire opened an old drawer and pulled out a stained recipe card. The edges were bent, the ink faded. It was her mother's recipe, the one she made when things were falling apart and food was the only language that still worked. Claire had stopped cooking it after her husband got sick. Every smell brought back hospital rooms, whispered prayers, and the sound of machines at night. Tonight, though, her hands moved on their own. Chop, stir, wait. The rhythm calmed her, even as her chest tightened. Upstairs, David sat on his bed with his phone in his hand, scrolling without seeing anything. The power outage annoyed him at first, then made him restless. He smelled something warm in the air. Not fast food. Not leftovers. Something real. He frowned, confused. The smell pulled him back to childhood memories he didn't often visit. He didn't want to feel those things. Feeling hurt too much. Downstairs, Claire wiped her hands on a towel and looked at the clock. It was late. She almost turned off the stove. Almost. Then she heard David's footsteps on the stairs. Her heart jumped. She didn't want to make a big deal out of this. No speeches. No explanations. Just an offer. David stepped into the kitchen and stopped. The dim light from a battery lamp filled the room. Claire looked older in that light, tired but calm. She looked like someone who had been carrying weight quietly for a long time. That smells different, David said. His voice sounded unsure, like he had already decided not to stay. Claire didn't smile. She didn't push. She just said, I made something. If you want to taste it, taste it. Not eat dinner. Not sit with me. Just taste it. David hesitated. He didn't want to open doors he couldn't close. But he nodded. Okay, double quotes. Claire poured a small amount into a bowl and placed it on the table. She sat across from him, hands folded, eyes lowered. David picked up the spoon. He expected nothing, maybe even disappointment. Instead, the first bite stopped him cold. He swallowed slowly. This tastes like... He stopped, searching for the word. Home. The word hung in the air between them. Claire felt her throat tighten. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. David took another bite, then another. His shoulders relaxed without him noticing. The storm outside faded into the background. My dad used to say food could fix bad days, David said quietly. I didn't believe him. Claire nodded. Sometimes it just helps you breathe. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. David finished the bowl and didn't rush away. That alone felt like a small miracle. He asked where the recipe came from. Claire told him about her mother, about a small town, about learning to cook during hard winters. David listened. Really listened. For the first time since his father died, David felt something soften inside him. Not happiness. Not relief. Just a sense that he wasn't alone in the house anymore. The power came back on. Lights flickered. The moment could have ended there. But it didn't single quotes to clean up. David surprised himself by offering to help. They worked side by side, not touching, not awkward, just present. The kitchen felt warmer now, even without the stove. Before heading upstairs, David paused. Thanks, he said, for asking me. Claire met his eyes. You're always welcome." He nodded and left. Claire stood alone again. But the silence felt different, lighter, like something had been returned to its place. She didn't know it yet. But that single offer, small, simple, honest, had cracked open a long-closed door. And once opened, it wouldn't be so easy to shut again. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under the pale dawn light. Claire woke early, not because she had to, but because something inside her wouldn't let her sleep. Last night's quiet kitchen moment with David replayed in her mind like a scene from a movie she didn't want to forget. She felt lighter, but also aware that this wasn't just about cooking. It was about connection, something she hadn't realized she had been missing as much as he had. David, meanwhile, moved slower than usual that morning. He didn't know why he stayed downstairs after finishing the food. He didn't know why he wanted to ask questions, to hear her voice without urgency, without distraction. Normally, mornings were rushed. Coffee, toast, a word or two before heading out. But that night, the small act of sharing food had opened something. Something he didn't know he needed but couldn't ignore by the afternoon. Claire found herself preparing another meal, this time with a little more confidence, a little more purpose. She chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and hummed softly a sound she hadn't made in years. David came down later, not because she called him, but because he felt drawn. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her move with ease, with a calm authority that made him feel safe, though he didn't admit it. "Smells good again," he said. Almost shyly, Claire smiled without looking up. "I thought I'd try something simple today. Breakfast for dinner. My mom used to do that when we were busy, just to make everything feel okay." Her voice was steady, but warm. David stepped closer, a small bowl in hand. He didn't need an invitation this time. He was ready. He sat, the silence stretching just long enough to make it meaningful. They ate together, but not like a mother and son. Not like strangers forced into family roles. They ate like two people rediscovering what it meant to care without expectation. David tasted the eggs and toast, the subtle seasoning Claire had perfected over the years. He closed his eyes at one bite, a small smile tugging at his lips. Claire noticed, but didn't comment. She let the moment breathe. After the meal, David stayed at the table. He asked her about the town she grew up in, the school she went to, the friends she had before life became heavy. Claire answered openly, her stories flowing easily now. She spoke about winters where snow piled so high they couldn't leave the house. Summers, when her mother taught her how to garden, and how those small moments shaped her sense of care. David listened intently. Questions kept spilling from him, some practical, some curious about feelings he rarely acknowledged. Hours passed without noticing. They shared laughter, small, gentle, not forced, the kind that crept into the heart quietly. It was strange for both of them, this lightness, this lack of awkward tension. Claire remembered thinking how easy it felt to be heard. David realized he hadn't felt that way in a long time, not with anyone. That evening, Claire had to leave for an appointment. She picked up her coat, but paused when David walked to the door with her, holding it open silently. "Whoever gets to sit across from you tonight is lucky," he said, and she stopped mid-step. The tone wasn't flirtatious or awkward, just an acknowledgement of presence, of attention, of gratitude. Claire felt warmth spread in her chest. She smiled genuinely. "Thank you, David. That means more than you know." He nodded, and she left, the door clicking softly behind her, alone in the quiet house again. Claire reflected on the past 2 days. She realized that offering David a simple taste of food had opened something far bigger than she expected. It wasn't just about him. It was about her, too. The act of nurturing, of sharing, had reminded her of who she was outside of responsibilities, grief, and loss. She felt alive again, in a way she hadn't in years. David sat in the kitchen, looking at the bowls she had cleaned. He didn't feel the need to fill the silence with words. The house, once heavy with absence, felt different now. It had room for laughter, for shared moments, for trust. David realized that connection wasn't always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it was a quiet meal, a soft smile, A simple question asked and answered. He felt gratitude not just for Claire but for the ability to feel again. Days turned into weeks. The simple rhythm of cooking and sharing meals became routine. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it didn't matter. Claire and David found themselves talking more, laughing more, and noticing the small details that made their house a home. It wasn't about replacing anyone who had been lost. It was about filling a space with care, understanding, and presence. One evening, Claire came home exhausted but excited. She had planned to try a new recipe, something from her mother she had never attempted. David was already in the kitchen, chopping ingredients with quiet precision. "Need help?" he asked. She handed him the spoon and they worked side by side again. The familiarity was comforting, natural, unspoken. They didn't need explanations or labels. They just moved together to people rebuilding trust and warmth through something as simple as cooking, as the food cooked. David leaned against the counter and smiled, watching her. "You know," he said softly, "I never realized how much I missed this. Just talking, being here." Claire paused, heart tightening. "I think we both did," she admitted. It wasn't a confession of romance or longing. It was an acknowledgement of shared humanity, of lives touched by loss and slowly healing through small acts of care. By the time the meal was ready, the sun had set, painting the sky with gold and pink streaks visible through the kitchen window. They sat down together, and for the first time in years, it felt like home complete, warm and alive. The storm that had once made the house feel lonely was gone. What remained was trust, care, and the quiet promise that life could feel full again, even in unexpected ways. Claire realized something profound as she watched David take the first bite of her new recipe. Offering someone a taste wasn't just about food. It was about attention, about presence, about letting someone know that they mattered. It was about healing, connection, and opening doors that had been closed for too long. And sometimes the simplest acts, like sharing a meal, asking a question, or pausing to listen, could shift everything. David smiled again, this time more openly. "You've really outdone yourself," he said. Claire laughed, the sound light and free. They finished the meal in silence, comfortable, content. Neither spoke about grief, loss, or fear. They didn't need to. What mattered was here and now, and it was enough. By the time the night fell, Claire and David had settled into the living room, a quiet bond stretching between them that neither rushed to define. It wasn't about family titles or expectations. It was about respect, care, and the ability to be present for one another. Claire felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not because of the food she cooked, but because she had created space for healing. David felt gratitude, not just for her, but for the chance to feel connected again. In the end, the story wasn't about a single meal, a recipe, or even the rain that had fallen days before. It was about the moments that build trust, that allow people to see each other fully, without judgment, without pressure. Claire and David had discovered that connection could be restored slowly, gently, through presence and care. And sometimes all it took was the courage to offer someone a taste not just of food, but of attention, understanding, and warmth. The next morning, Claire woke again, feeling lighter, more alive. David was downstairs, already preparing breakfast, humming softly. They didn't speak much at first, but they didn't need to. The air between them was full of something that couldn't be forced: trust, care, and a quiet understanding that life could be gentle, even after loss. And in that moment, Claire realized that the simplest act of offering could change everything. One bite, one conversation, one shared moment was enough to remind them both that life, even after grief, could still be full of warmth, connection, and hope.